And Gervonta Davis has to settle for a majority draw in Brooklyn as a huge favorite over Lamont Roach. Raheem, I was in Brooklyn while you were holding it down with the Chris Eubank, Conor Benn build up. I went ahead and covered that fight in New York, my hometown. And quickly, I'll give some opening thoughts and then let's get the game from Raheem. So even I do think Lamont Roach won this fight. And to give a quick scorecard, yeah, I was scoring during the fight, but also just watching the fight as a whole from front to back. I thought Lamont Roach won rounds 1, 4, 7, 8, 10, 11, and 12, which if you add it all up gives him 7 rounds to 5. And that doesn't include the ninth round where he lost that round 10-9 with the infamous Steve Willis no call on the knockdown. I compared it to when Floyd Mayweather had to have the only knockdown of his career against Carlos Hernandez. He actually hit Hernandez and hurt his hand, and then had to touch the canvas. And it was a knockdown, and this was more egregious because Floyd Mayweather actually landed a shot and then had to let his hand touch the ground because his hand hurt from landing a punch. Tank Gervonta Davis got hit with a shot, a light jab in the eye. Didn't like the juice or whatever it was from his hair coming in his eye. He takes a knee. Should have been a knockdown. If that's a knockdown, Lamont Roach is the new WBA lightweight champion. And I just think Roach, man, from round 7 on, fought a brilliant fight. The first 6 rounds, very slow fight. I mean, this was Gervonta Davis's Shakur Stevenson, Edwin De Los Santos for a few rounds. I thought they were flirting with CompuBox history early, but really once Lamont Roach felt the power of Tank and felt comfortable with it, he took over that fight, which makes me think a rematch goes one of two ways. Either Gervonta Davis, who I do, and I'm not saying anything to take away from Lamont Roach because he outperformed everyone, mine included, expectations, and he had a number of things that gave Gervonta Davis problems that we'll get to. But either Lamont Roach, who once he felt the power, got comfortable, he's either going to pick up where he left off and just has Tank's number because he had Tank's number down the stretch of this fight, or Gervonta Davis, who was sharper last June against Frank Martin, came out with a sense of urgency in his high guard that he never went to the high guard in this fight. And he'll do that when he falls behind. That sense of urgency never came. Maybe Tank in a rematch could find that and win a rematch, or Lamont Roach is just going to pick up where he left off. This is both both times he fought guys that were comfortable at the weight in Isak Cruz or Lamont Roach. They took the power better than expected. And Davis actually struggled with these guys who were comfortable in the pocket and could match a lot of his timing. Anyways, Raheem, yeah, I think it wasn't a good look for Gervonta Davis. What were your takeaways?
As of March 2nd, 2025, Lamont Roach is Fighter of the Year.
Okay.
We are going to talk a lot about Tank Gervonta Davis because he's a superstar and he's a major draw and he's the reason anybody's tuning into this fight. But out of respect, we must talk quite a bit about Lamont Roach and the amount of disrespect that he received going into this fight. I don't know a single person, not one,
That picked
that
him.
called this fight for him. I don't know a single person, not one, that said he was going to be particularly competitive in this fight. Now, that doesn't mean every single person said they didn't go so far as to say it was a bum or this is a walkover fight, but nobody gave him a chance. Nobody thought he was going to be competitive. And most people thought he was going to get knocked out probably in the first half or middle rounds of this fight.
Yeah,
That is something that not only he absorbed in the buildup, but he did so with good humor.
with
I
grace.
saw him on shows where people were to his face being mad disrespectful, joking about him getting knocked out, laughing it off, like giving this guy no reverence, no even respect because he's clearly there on your show. And he was willing to take that humbly and argue, like, oh, this guy, you know what I mean? Like, he's not accepting that that's his fate, but he is accepting that that's how people are addressing him. and giving him no shot and doing it in good humor is difficult. Like, to be a fighter of that caliber and to have that amount of humility, I would say is a very, very rare gemstone. And so I respect that 100%. So much so that even I was like, does this guy even want it? Like, he's not even getting mad when people are talking to him like this on respected sports shows, on huge podcasts. They're talking shit to him like they're Gervonta Davis. I would be fuming. You know what I mean? But this guy took it all in stride. And then he got in there and was focused from round 1 to round 12. He did not win every round, but his amount of focus and determination and resilience to execute was phenomenal. Was phenomenal. I haven't followed this guy's whole career. I don't know whether that's normal for him or not, but he had a hell of a night. And the story is the amount of focus, determination, and execution coming from Lamont Roach, and the fact that the superstar, the knockout artist, the big Vegas favorite, I felt was unfocused and a bit entitled for the entire fight. Like, the fact that Gervonta Davis felt like he could call timeout himself, put a knee down,
And cop
then
to it
go
after
over
the fight.
nothing, no interaction with the referee, no asking. Even we've all seen fighters, something happen, they get hit low, they get a headbutt, something happens, and they look at the ref and they try to like back off the action and get the ref to step in, get the ref's attention so that the ref stops the action and so they can take a pause. Gervonta didn't even need the ref. He was just the officiating his own fight, taking the knee, and then being addressed in the corner with the towel, wiping away. Like, I've never known that to be in any rule book in any state or country anywhere. Since when? If your mouthpiece comes out and everybody sees it, you still have to wait for the ref to stop the action, let you go to your corner and put your mouthpiece back in. And even then, you're not allowed to get any instruction. We know it happens, but technically, you're not allowed to get any instruction. For him to get his face wiped in the corner on the apron from your trainer, and then the referee start counting, and then Gervonta be like, stop counting, and the referee stops counting and just takes what Gervonta tells him as his instruction, is evidence of how dominant in one regard Tank has been, but just how entitled he has become in thinking that he can literally be in there and do anything. Taking a knee when something is bothering you, whether it be a braid in your eye, a mouthpiece coming out, a broken hand, whatever it is, and thinking that that doesn't create a knockdown, is a loss of focus. He's not an amateur. He knows what constitutes a knockdown. And it doesn't even have to be on the end of a punch. If you take a knee, that's a knockdown. So there could be no action happening. You take that knee, that's a knockdown.
Just to interject, there's people trying on social media to spread around like a Google search that reveals, oh, well, technically a knockdown if you just take a knee and it's something with the. There's people trying to explain that, well, technically it's not a knockdown if he just took it. Bullshit. Yeah, bullshit.
I
Yeah.
mean, that's news to me. Listen, I
Yeah,
haven't
yeah,
read through all the annals of the history of boxing
yeah.
rules, but I've been covering the sport a long time.
He was
I
touched with a
don't
jab
believe
too.
that.
So, like
And
if
it was
light jab activated the eye juice from the hair, that's a
right.
knockdown. That's the effect of a jab from Lamont Roach.
At the very minimum, the referee has to be involved. Like, the referee can call timeout. He can call timeout, and then you take a knee, but you can't take a knee and then consider
It
that a timeout.
it reminded me, there's this clip of Michael Jordan when he was on the Wizards, and the referee looks at Michael like, was it a foul, Michael? Because I'll believe you.
Yes,
I
I remember
yeah.
that clip. That's what was happening here. And listen, losing focus, being frustrated, because he was also frustrated down the stretch of that fight. And that is part of the game. To me, that's a knockdown from mental domination or mental loss of focus, whether Lamont Roach created that in Tank or if he just lost focus because he wasn't training his mind to be prepared to be frustrated. He wasn't expecting to be frustrated, which is what created the frustration. And he lost focus enough to do something that cost him a point. No matter which it is, that is still the result of one fighter being better prepared and executing better than the other. And that is, by any estimation that I can remember in the entirety of the time that I've covered the sport, gotta be a knockdown. With that said, Sean, I still had Roach winning the fight without the knockdown. I still had Roach winning the fight without the knockdown. And I don't think he beat Davis's ass or, I'm not saying that Davis didn't have his moments in the fight, didn't win rounds in the fight, isn't still an excellent fighter who could potentially win the rematch. All of that is absolutely potentially true. Absolutely. And Davis didn't have a terrible performance either. I just thought he just lost the fight. And I thought he lost the fight not because of his boxing ability or what his potential could be in the rematch, but I felt the entire time he was unfocused. In the corner, he was arguing with his trainers. He even said in the post fight, he didn't know what round it was. He thought it was round 8. I've heard of fighters thinking it was, one round off one way or the other. But if you're 4 rounds off, your head's really not in the game. I don't know if that's down to the trainers or Gervonta himself, but that part was a mess. The fact that he performed as well as he did with as little focus as it appeared that he had and as much chaos as it was in the corner, it actually is a testament to just how skilled a fighter he is. But it was a mental game that he lost on Saturday night. And it should have been a boxing match that he lost in addition to that, or
Yeah,
because of it.
to put it in, the technical terms of the fight, Roach, he controlled the center of the ring more than Gervonta did. He backed Gervonta up more than the other way around. And down the stretch, he had Davis, who never throws a lot of punches per round anyway, except for that ninth round after that knockdown moment. He had him timid a lot and respectful of the power. And styles make fights. These are both guys who have some similarities in style. Roach was surprisingly kind of the bigger man coming up from 130, and his timing and his counter punching and his chin and his confidence, all that just it gave Davis fits, especially in the
Mm-hmm.
second half of the fight. And you taught like giving credit to Roach for what a class act he's been. There's that juxtaposition, even though they're from a lot of the same background. And Roach is a blue collar fighter who's really had nothing handed to him. He's fresh off fighting on Pro Box TV, and now he's all the way on a pay-per-view. And you're right, Davis has been entitled. And a lot of that lack of focus has been, he's had enablers who have filled his head with all this rhetoric that it's a business and the fans, they don't care about you. And it's not about belts, it's not about legacy, it's about this money, it's about this money. Well, good job. You've taken a guy whose natural temperament, you could question some of, the character that showed through in this fight and in other ways, but his natural temperament is, he's a beast. He's a fighter, and you domesticate that fighting spirit a little bit. You want a fighter that's, I want to fight all these motherfuckers. I want to prove I'm the best. I could beat them all. And then that's when you, as the handler, the businessman, calm him down and do your job. But you don't want him thinking like that. Not at this age or this stage, and when he's
He
peaking.
went into the fight discussing retirement
Yes,
without having fought his contemporaries or the greatest challenges in his division. That is, I believe, because he's bored.
yes.
And that might give reason for why he's unfocused and delivered a performance that was not to the level as we expected. And again, potentially the reason for that is because Lamont Roach was just so damn good on the night. That's possibly the reason as well, but it's not the reason for Davis's lack of focus. And I think that's the story of the night. Once you finish telling the story of Lamont's execution, it's absolutely down to whether or not Hank was able to perform at his best because he's mentally not dialed in. He's not challenging himself to the point where he's getting up for these fights, knows he's in danger, determined and focused and narrow-mindedly looking for the W in any way he can get it and not wasting a punch and not thinking about anything other than getting a win. There's other shit going on in his head. He's in there, I think, talking to himself about a lot of stuff when he's in the corner. He's talking to his trainers like, "Oh, listen to me," and he's arguing with them. Then he's got a new lead trainer right in front of him, and I think all of that is evidence that he's not really dialed in, and that might be because he doesn't even believe that his opponents are challenges, and he was wrong on Saturday night. Lamont Roach was not just a challenger; he was a champion on Saturday night
and fought like one with the confidence of
and fought like one.
yeah. And yeah, is and he had Davis and his team have failed to capitalize on the momentum of the Ryan Garcia fight. And now you're left wondering, was that the peak moment? Beating very talented star Ryan Garcia, who still has yet to win a world title, but was that the peak? Because, I covered his fight against Rolly Romero in Brooklyn, same venue 2.5 years ago. Madonna was there. A lot of A-listers showed up to that fight, and hardly any of them were there at this fight. And what that tells me is, that was supposed to be like his De La Hoya Mayweather kind of moment. And I mean, I get, and then, he didn't follow it up with Ricky Hatton at the MGM for, no disrespect to them, but that they haven't capitalized on it. And it's funny when you talk about the entitlement with Gervonta Ibrahim, because part of me wanted to believe in him because he's one of the last fighters in the United States that's selling in the United States that hasn't had to give in to the Riyadh season takeover, right? But it's a little bit fitting that if he is the last draw in this particular era and mold of American boxing, which has been the last 10 or so plus years, he is the poster boy, one of them, for a lot of the reasons why the American boxing scene dwindled into a place where it's so easy for Turki Al-Sheikh to come in and monopolize it all. Like here you got this talented fighter with speed and power and all this, but that entitlement, he thinks he should be the literally the face of boxing, the biggest name in the sport without having to earn it. And that kind of mentality in the US is part of why it's being taken over, from overseas influence. So as much as
Yeah, an honorable
yeah,
mention to Shakur Stevenson, who tweeted, "Listen, if you can't get that rematch to Lamont Roach, I got a championship challenge for you right over here." That's the energy that we're looking for.
yeah,
That's what we want to see. And shout out really to Calvin Ford, who I think was also very humble and had a lot of humility with the trainer, musical
Barry
chair
Hunt.
situation. Tank
Oh
was kind of
yeah,
shouting at him
Raheem.
in the corner.
I
What's that?
asked them in the post fight. I said like, "Hey, Coach Barry Hunter, Coach Calvin, you guys have both built champions from scratch. No disrespect. You guys were gentlemen and collaborated this whole camp, but was the trainer switch did that hurt Gervonta and the dynamic of the fight?" And of course, neither one threw the other under the bus. So shout out to Calvin for that. Like he's like, "Nope, nope, I'm not letting that enter my mind, me and Barry are brothers." Like, but yeah, go ahead.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
And in the corner, there's evidence that there is an issue there. To me, even in the post-fight press conference, it was just like, you asked that question for a reason, and that's something they're going to have to work out. And what Calvin said, that I thought was the best takeaway from the corner, was that before Tank even got into the press room, he said, "We walked into this fight talking about retirement. This might light the fire." He knows his fighter. He knows that kid that he started with. And what's Tank talking about now? Well, I got 4 more fights in me now. What does that mean? That he wants and needs the challenge to wake up that beast, to keep that fire burning bright, to deliver the performances that made him a superstar, that isn't going to be there if the challenge isn't there. That is where the loss of focus and desire, and you start thinking about retirement and what else you could do. And I also respect Gervonta's maturity. I thought, even though he lost focus in the fight, which we saw on Saturday night, I didn't mind that what he's talking about sounds like he's trying to be consciously maturing. He's with intent trying to grow up, and he may not know exactly how to do it. None of us really do. So I thought what I was hearing was a young man who realized that he needs to be a more mature man and trying to find his way and figuring out where boxing and the commitment that he has to the sport plays a role in that, how he can be a better man. That's what I'm hearing. And I 100% back that. And I think that's where his mind should be. And I also think that if you are challenging yourself in the sport, it will serve that. These two things do not have to be mutually exclusive. That's part of the maturity, being able to be disciplined, being able to take on those challenges,
That's where your
and
growth is coming
outside of the
from.
ring, be focused on growing up, being a good father, being a good man, and being a good son, all those things, and finding balance in life. It's not easy. I've never had to do that as a superstar boxer, but we've all had to do it in some regard in our lives if we're going to be functioning adults. It's a hard to do thing in front of the entire world, but I like that he's trying to do it. So, it's just not all criticism. I'm not giving him a bunch of stick or shitting on him at all. I think evidence in what he was able and unable to do on Saturday night is just down to him not finding the right challenges that will focus his mind. At the same time, it is an important time for him to realize he needs to grow up and just find the balance. Find the balance. These one thing does not have to diminish the other. It's a difficult thing becoming a grown up, and he can do it, but we can't do it with feeding this entitlement or pretending that wasn't a knockdown or even acting like he didn't lose the fight. He absolutely did. And this is also to the sanctioning bodies. Lamont Roach shouldn't even have to petition about this. They should step in. This is so clear. If forget about the rest of the cards, that's a knockdown. They should adjust the cards, correct that mistake by the official, and then whatever that makes the cards, then that is what the result of the fight is. Period. So this is one of those things that is correctable in boxing. And then put the rematch on. But
Yeah.
put the fight, let's see if Gervonta comes back in the rematch and does what everybody thought he was going to do the first time, or if Lamont Roach doubles down and makes an even better show next time and lets you know this wasn't no fluke.
Yeah, I think they could both do better. I definitely think Gervonta is better than he showed, and not to take away from Roach. But again, I think Roach could say, "Hey, I know the power you got. I know you could take it. I'm gonna take off right where I left off in rounds 7 through 12." Um, and I'd love it if Gervonta would let Calvin switch it up a little bit, because Calvin's always had to do like Phil Jackson would do with Kobe Bryant, which is you sandwich the criticism in between a lot of praise and keeping that ego high of this star athlete. But I'd like to see it, let him get a little Pat Riley on and let him get on Tank, let him get on your ass a little bit, Tank, because it can't always be with that soft cushion around it. Like maybe you need Calvin to just give it to you like it really is on this one, because I think Calvin, as much as he puts up with from Gervonta, I'm sure he's got a lot to say, and he knows exactly what he saw, and he knows exactly what he's got to fix. He probably knows Gervonta better than anybody does, known him since he was a little kid, and I got a lot of respect for Coach Ford. So yeah, definitely want to see that rematch. Although Gervonta in the post fight, first thing he said was not next. He's apparently got something else planned. He said whoever he's fighting next was in his dressing room, and he didn't tell us who was in his dressing room.
It's so weird. It
Yeah,
was such. Yeah, that was your question too.
yeah,
He
yeah.
responded that, oh yeah, he was in my dressing room. What the fuck?
I was
We
like,
don't know who's
Score
in the dressing
Stevenson?
room. Tell us or don't tell us. Do we know now? Has it? I mean, has anybody leaked who was in the dressing room?
Some people speculate it was Jake Paul or Pitbull Cruz were the only two names I heard. Pitbull Cruz sounds realistic.
Listen, man. If
Yeah,
either one of those is who he's talking about being next instead of Roach, he's headed in the wrong direction.
yeah,
Like the fighter in you has to demand that rematch. Has to, and again, he even said it from the podium. It was me, right? If he believes that, oh, this was just down to me. He was taking ownership of the poor performance. He didn't go so far as to say I lost the fight. That's a lot to ask of a fighter, but he was taking responsibility for his
wasn't
performance.
yeah okay, but he wasn't Dmitry Bivol after the loss to Beterbiev. Wasn't approaching
Oh,
anywhere near that level of accountability
fair
and
enough. Fair
inspection.
enough.
Like just
But yes, okay, yes, but at least
Yeah.
I believe he was taking
Yeah.
responsibility, but like
Yeah.
in a way it was disrespectful, like, oh, it wasn't Roach's great performance, it was my lack of performance. Well, okay. So that's why we need to see it again, because we can't take your word for that.
Right.
And Jake Paul or Rolly, like, come on, man.
It was Pitbull.
Come
Yeah.
on. You know, I mean, at this point, to be fair, I want to see Lamont Roach more than Shakur Stevenson. I want the rematch.
Yeah.
I want the rematch. If you say I can get Tank and Shakur, or I can get Shakur and Roach, or I can get Roach and Shakur, I'm going Tank Roach first, Roach Shakur second, and Tank Shakur third.
Yeah. Well, and to this is something, Raheem, you're older than me, even though your skin's better than mine. You look great, but the guys that have been doing this longer than me, like yourself, all seem to arrive at a position of, no premature crowning. And, because I would pontificate, well, I think Davis is showing us more of the complete package going forward, can counterpunch. I give him the edge over Stevenson. And veterans like yourself are always like, I gotta see it. And I'm not doing this who I think's gonna win shit. These guys all got question marks about their game until they see each other. And styles make fights. You never know who can exploit whose weakness with what. So I arrive there when it comes to Tank and Shakur. I don't
Mm.
want to flip flop and okay, so Tank probably should have lost Lamont Roach. Shakur is gonna wash Tank now. No, no. Shakur has to answer, would you be as comfortable in the pocket as Lamont Roach was, staying in the kitchen? Because Lamont would get hit with a big shot and stay right in there and return fire. Will you be willing to do that? And then for Tank, if you fight like that, Shakur might win the fight going away. So Tank, can you dial it up? Can you deal with frustration and a class fighter really showing up to beat you? And Shakur, when that heat starts coming your way from Gervonta, particularly if he's actually sharp and on point, are you going to stay in the kitchen like Lamont Roach did? Even though you may seem to be more talented and definitely more decorated than Roach, we got to see the fights. So I get why
Are
you
you
guys do that.
comfortable leaving this question mark in the book that reads Chapter Lamont Roach? If Gervonta Davis is okay with turning the page, he might be in the wrong book. It's not the history books where we thought he would be. You cannot be comfortable with that. Where you are in the annals of history in that book determines by what pages you're willing to turn and win. You gotta not just want that rematch, you gotta demand that rematch. You gotta be up at night restless until you get that rematch, because that ain't the best of you. And you let that guy get way too much of you, and people don't believe what you're telling them anymore. And that has to not set easy on you. You can't think about another fight until you make this statement. I guarantee you, Lamont Roach and any fighter other than Lamont Roach, if Gervonta is willing to turn the page on Lamont Roach, will not respect Gervonta Davis the way they did on Friday night after what happened on Saturday night.
Mayweather Castillo, Mayweather Maidana. That's when his mentor had fights like these. Actually, this was worse than those two fights. A lot of, maybe a lot of people thought Mayweather Castillo won, but some people thought it was a draw. And anyway, yes, when Floyd was in this scenario, he rematched both Maidana and Castillo.